Coming up on Transforming Grace TV.
And I through the growing that we've done and the healing that we've done, I came to learn that, I married Liz because she made me feel really good about me. And that was such a misguided reality.
Yeah. Welcome to Transforming Grace. I am your host, Loren Norris, and I am here with my lovely bride and co-host, Karin.
Hello.
And we have some phenomenal guests in studio with us today. Guests who have walked a very similar journey to ours. They've experienced what God can do in broken relationships, and they have a story that will rock your socks. I really want you to have time to hear and be a part of what we're doing here today, but I also want you to understand this may not be a conversation for young children. Teenagers, if you're good parents, I challenge you to bring your teens into the room and let them sit through this conversation. Over the next 4 or 5 episodes, you're going to hear some really good stuff that they need to hear, because I promise you they're hearing it from everybody else in the world, and they may not hear it straight from you, but they need to hear it straight. So we're going to dive into this conversation. I want you to help me welcome our guest, Pastor Liz Jones and her husband, Jeff. And thank you both for joining us here today. The conversation with regard to marriage, for most people, starts 5 or 6 years into the marriage because they don't bother to plan for the marriage. I think James Dobson said it best when he said, people spend thousands of dollars on a wedding and nothing on preparing for the marriage. Has that been your experience, not only personally, but what you've witnessed?
Actually, I think it starts even before that. I think there's a great quote from a book that we love that says your marriage problems started when you're about 4 years old.
Wow.
When you learn how to communicate, when you learn how to deal with conflict, and you bring all of that into a marriage, and you think it's going to be this awesome, perfect thing. And I through the growing that we've done and the healing that we've done, I came to learn that, I married Liz because she made me feel really good about me. And that was such a misguided reality.
Yeah.
And so we didn't really know anything about being married when we did get married. And like so many couples quickly began to have problems when the fairy tale, and the fairy dust came off of the fairy tale.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, I would. I think they spend, like you said, a lot of energy and what are you doing to prepare for the rest of your life as opposed to what you're doing to prepare for one day. So many times we see that. And also dealing with pre-marriage, there will be couples where you can spotlight and foresee cautions and yellow flags, sometimes red flags, and more times than not, staying in ministry, we'll see those couples back around in the crisis side that didn't be proactive in maybe putting a hold on the marriage because everything was set. So yes, absolutely.
Well, we tend to put on our best face in that dating phase or even in the pre-dating phase. I mean, you'll look your best, you sound your best, you do your best, you behave your best, you say the right words, and then all of a sudden life hits and the real comes out of you. Mm-hmm. It's pretty amazing. I train a lot of communicators, and I tell them all in the first session, understand this, you will never, ever, 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 ever squeeze a pineapple hard enough to get ketchup out of it. It's not in there. But what's in you, that's what's coming out when you're under pressure. And I think that's probably no more true than it is in marriage.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that even breaking it down into that such is that people just don't understand what true intimacy is. And in that dating phase, false intimacy says, well, if you knew the real me, you wouldn't stay with me. The fear that's there. And so really, that's been another big part of our journey the last 10 years is really learning about what intimacy means and about full transparency within our marriage. And we did not exhibit that in those first 22 years.
Well, you probably had the same fears that I had. I mean, Karin and I were married almost 10 years before I came to the realization that she did like me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I spent the majority of my life sabotaging every relationship I'd ever been in. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would find reasons to make them leave. And then almost like a dare. You're not really going to stay, are you? Seriously? Mm-hmm. Really? Even after that? Even after me doing that, you're going to stay?
Well, people with rejection issues will do that because I dare you to love me. And I'm actually going to make it as hard as you can to love me, to prove that when you can't love me, that I knew ultimately that lie that I believe about myself, which is a rejection lie that I'm not lovable. We bring that from childhood usually as well. And then it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy. And then we begin to believe we really are unlovable. Which, you know, when there's so much self-contempt and we can't love ourselves, it's really hard to love anyone else or believe anybody can love us.
Now, where did you two meet?
On an airplane.
Yeah, it was. Neither one of us were supposed to actually be on that flight. I was a flight attendant, and Jeff was on a business trip, and they had missed their original flight, and so neither of us were actually supposed to be on that flight. And we joke around because it was one of those back in the day flights where you got a full service, and then drinks, and then peanuts, and then more drinks and peanuts from Chicago to Dallas, which you. We're lucky to get.
Yeah, you're barely able to run up and down the aisle of a plane doing that.
So as a flight attendant, we knew it was there was no time for extras. So anyways, we had gotten to where he was sleeping, and somebody said, we'll come back and get him. It was a new flight attendant. And I said, oh no, this guy's got to eat now or never. And I think I felt bad because I abruptly shook him.
She kind of hit me. I was sound asleep.
But being caught up in the fast pace, I shook him, and then I thought, oh God, that was kind of a hard shake. So when he opened his eyes, I tried to soften the blow by saying, wake up, it's the good fairy. And he doesn't remember, he says this, but he looked at me and he said, I believe it. So that's how we met. Yeah. Then we got married 10 months later.
Wow. Long dating relationship.
Long dating relationship. There was a lot of mitigating circumstances, but we were both, a little older. I was 27, Liz was 24, and neither of us were looking for that relationship, and boom, there she was. And again, she was the most amazing woman I'd ever met, and I coming to realize that what I loved about her was how I felt when I was around her. Mm-hmm. And it was just such a false sense, because I dealt with so much rejection, which really kind of led me down the path into the troublesome times that I had, was that just this overall sense of rejection and needing to be affirmed. Well, I was getting affirmed all over the place, so I loved it.
Well, for myself, when I met Jeff, going back to what I had always wanted when I got married was, I'd had a father growing up that had a lot of rage and anger, and it was, as the oldest of 3 children, it was really scary to watch the episodes that got physically violent, that he would lose his temper oftentimes, destroying the rooms, the things in a room, and not just at our home. We could be in public or at other people's homes. So that was something that I felt a lot of shame over, that it was embarrassing. And so I always felt like if my dad was different, then our family would be normal. And so I had this longing for my dad to be something different. So all I could do with that was fantasize about the man I would marry. I'm going to marry the exact opposite of my dad, and I'm going to have a perfect family in life. So
because that's really the only thing that's broken here.
Yeah, that's what I believed.
Wow.
So I imagined a man that I thought in my mind was perfect, that would give you the perfect marriage in life, and kind of had a vision of this man my whole life growing up. So when I met Jeff, it's as if that vision dropped out into a real person, and I felt like I had hit pay dirt, and that my life was going to just be the perfect forever, happily ever after. And our life together was going to have a family with children that felt safe and everything that I didn't have. So as we got married and real life hit, because we were still in that passionate in love phase in those 10 months, so that we didn't really go into getting to know each other and how each other handled stressful situations or things that
conflict and communication. Like I went back to my comment earlier about how those skills that you develop as a child, you bring either the skill you have or the lack thereof into marriage, and that's where as we get into those first few months, and I turned out to maybe not be quite the Prince Charming that Liz thought she had married. Well, guess what? She kind of quit affirming me as much. And so all of a sudden there was this division that neither of us really understood, but it was because of the expectations that we brought in that were developed long before we met each other.
When we come back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about that first moment of crisis when you looked at this, and I don't know about you, but for us it was kind of a, wow, did I make a mistake?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about that a little bit when we come back from the break. Thanks for joining us here with Transforming Grace TV. I am Loren Norris with my lovely bride and co-host Karin Norris, and we'll be right back after this.
Even though I
Coming up
married
on
somebody that
Transforming
was
Grace
exactly
TV.
opposite from my father, and he didn't bring that anger and rage in, when we hit crisis and we started to hit those moments that were difficult, that anger and rage was still in our relationship, but I was the one that brought it.
Wow. Welcome back to Transforming Grace TV, and we are in our studio today with our guest, Pastor Liz Jones, and her husband Jeff, and just talking about the real life of marriage and expectations. And Jeff said something very powerful before the break about the idea of walking into our relationships with all of the things that we learn to communicate with and without in our early years. And I really want to dig in a little bit more on that subject matter with the first crisis. When the first conflict came up, as you put it, the fairy dust came off, and you're now looking at the fairy tale going, wow, what have I done? How far into your marriage was that?
A couple of months.
Yeah.
I kind of remember we were actually living in Boston, Massachusetts at the time. And for me, it was a trigger of he made a choice that I felt that I wasn't being prioritized. So if we go back to what I said I never wanted in my marriage, that was the only way that I had learned to see hurt processed. So even though I married somebody that was exactly opposite from my father, and he didn't bring that anger and rage in, when we hit crisis and we started to hit those moments that were difficult, that anger and rage was still in our relationship, but I was the one that brought it.
Wow.
Thinking, I married somebody opposite my dad, so I'll never have that. Wow. It was still there, and I'm the one that brought the anger and the rage. Because as a young girl, that's what I had watched. I had watched my dad, who was hurt. That was the only way he knew to express it. That's how I handled it, and then you can speak for yourself.
Well, so again, back to the baggage, the stuff you bring in. So I was raised by a very critical mother, very shaming. That's kind of how she controlled the boys. A father who was there, but not emotionally. And so, it was always my mom, and she had this pretty big temper. And so when all of a sudden, I saw it come out in my wife, then I did the same thing I did when I became that little boy again. Mm-hmm. I retreated, I hid, I suppressed my own feelings. I just wanted to avoid conflict at all costs. Mm-hmm. And so I sacrificed, who God created me to be because of the strongholds in my life. And I just shut everything down and just tried to fix the conflict and didn't understand where this was coming from.
It was a whole lot easier to placate than resolve.
Mm-hmm. And I had no skills whatsoever to say, okay, let's talk about what this really is.
So while he compromised, I bludgeoned to try and make him be who I thought he needed to be for us to have this perfect marriage. So we were kind of in a cycle of bludgeon and then him compromising. But when somebody's compromising and they're not doing it from their heart. Yeah. They're doing it to appease somebody else, and I felt that. So that frustrated me too, because I knew it wasn't coming from his heart. So then I was mad about that.
You're giving in just because I want you to give in, and I don't like that.
And I wanted it from his heart. We just had no communication skills. We just went to what we had learned.
And I came from a dictatorship, basically, from childhood, and so I didn't know how to fight or how to communicate, or how to, quote, fight fair, if you will. But those are things that married couples have to know how to do. They have to know how to communicate, how to express their own feelings. I did not know what a feeling was, because I was a little boy that just didn't ever have any. And so, and I'm not saying that to try to get any sympathy, but that's the base, that's the mold I was working off of. Yeah. And so those are the things that I began to make decisions based on, those early strongholds, and that was long before I met Liz.
I remember a story, and you've probably heard it in different contexts, but there's a story of a guy who walks in and his wife is cooking a roast. And she lays it up on the counter and she cuts both ends off and sticks it in the pan and puts it in the oven. And he said, "Why did you cut the end off the roast?" She said, "It's just the way my mother always taught me to do it." And so Thanksgiving comes and they're at Mom's house and she cuts the ends off the roast and puts it in there. He looks at his mother-in-law and he goes, "Why do you cut the ends off the roast before you put it in the oven?" She said, "That's just the way I was taught to do it. I always have." And so at Christmas, Grandma's there too. And they're all preparing their meals, and Grandma's got the roast, and she takes that out of the package, throws the seasonings in the pot, puts the potatoes in the pot, puts carrots in the pot, grabs the whole roast, throws it in the pot. And he looks at her, and he looks at his wife, and he looks at his mother-in-law. He says, she doesn't cut the end off the roast. And they all went, Mom, you didn't cut the ends off the roast. She said, why would I do that? They're like, well, that's the way you taught us to do it. She said, silly girls, I taught you to do that because the roasting pan I had was too small because the oven was too small. That's the only way it would fit. And so we tend to grab onto these mechanisms of coping with whatever is in our life based on what we've learned. I remember a conversation with my own dad, and he said, my dad was never around when I was growing up, and I don't think he even knows who his is. I don't know how to dad. And I think that's a sad reality that our American society, especially with two parents earning in the home, is kind of forced into. But to exacerbate that, we have so many young people who are launching into marriage or launching into relationships too early or not prepared. They just haven't been equipped. And they feel like, well, I've met this person on Facebook or Snapchat or whatever. I've got all the details that I need to know. But they have never practiced failing. One of the things that I harass my teenage boys about is play fighting. Now, wrestling with themselves, with each other, I'm cool with that. You can tackle each other in the front yard all you want to. We'll clean up the blood later. It's not a big deal. Learn to be strong. Learn to take care of yourself. Learn to defend yourself. I recommend that. But don't ever put your hands on your girlfriend like that. That is not a wrestling dummy. That's not a tackling dummy. And play fighting only leads to real fighting. It gives you the willingness to lower that barrier and the coping mechanism that you become in the habit of. And that's dangerous for your relationship.
Well, I think that one thing that we had no idea, we have taught classes on intimacy, but a key part of intimacy is conflict intimacy. There's a great deal of value in a relationship. It's not about a result as much as how do we take a conflict and let the skills that we know how to develop by talking about our feelings actually grow us, because it's really not even about the issue. It's about learning how to relate and dig deep and share our feelings with one another, which actually can deepen the level of intimacy that a couple will share. And we had no skills to do that. And then we also, like you were saying, the things you've seen happen in your life, that's what we also brought in about marriage and the shelf life. When we would fight and continue to have those disagreements, in my mind, this isn't the marriage I ever wanted. This isn't the fairy tale I thought I was going to have. But my parents had a terrible marriage, and that's just what we're going to have. On the other hand, I had no idea that for Jeff you were thinking.
Yeah, I had this mentality, and it was, again, it wasn't something that I thought about all the time, but it was something that as I became healthier and more healed, as we went down this path, I realized that I thought marriage had a shelf life. I realized I had never seen a marriage go the distance. I'd never seen a success. Only a couple of my friends' parents were still together. My parents had divorced. And so I just assumed that all marriages ended because it's what I learned. It's like cutting onions off the roast.
Yeah.
And so I realized that I took that mentality into our conflict. Okay, so is this the fight that she calls the lawyer? And I guess this is...
I had no idea. I had no idea that that's what he was thinking, that we were really going to... Is this the divorce? Every time. I had no idea.
Which one's going to be big enough to be the
Yes.
Yeah, and I just assumed that at some point in time that would happen. She'd just get tired of it, and it would be over, and we would have to start over. And it's sad that it's sad that we begin to think those things as children, and we clearly bring them into our relationships.
Yeah. When we come back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about some of the coping skills, especially in younger relationships. And by younger, I don't mean just the age of the people, but the early stages of a relationship. What kind of coping skills can we recommend for people to deal with some of those crises? We'll be right back after this.
Coming up on
What do you expect out of your
TransformingGrace
marriage?
TV.
I expect to be happy. The Bible doesn't talk about that at all. I mean, it's
Welcome back to Transforming Grace. I am Loren Norris here with my lovely bride and co-host Karin. And we have in-studio guests today who have quite the story. And we want to talk more about conflict resolution. Pastor Liz and her husband Jeff. So with conflict resolution, one of the challenges that we see, and I hate to be this direct with it, but we recently had an election that resulted in protests with people literally having temper tantrums, what you would expect of a 4-year-old on the streets. I'm not going to take my tests. I want you to bring me pizza and mocha. I'm not going to. And I look at that and I think, okay, well, I understand being disappointed, and that's fair. And I understand if you don't believe that everything that happened is fair. I get that. Where did we teach our entire generation to respond to conflict that way or to disappointment that way? And how do we stop that from being the first week of their marriage? Because I'm guessing that the idea that I've opened this gift that is my bride or my groom, and I look in there and go, that's not what I thought I was getting. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be different than the election.
I have 2 thoughts. Go back to what Jeff was saying a minute ago about what is it really you're in love with when you're getting married? Because if it's about the way I feel around, the way that I feel about me when I'm around you, rather than I love you, then what are we really in love with? We're really in love with ourselves. We're not in love with another person. So I think that that's where a lot of marriages start. They start because you make me feel good about me. I love me around you. When we get married and real life hits, I don't always love the way I feel around you anymore, so maybe I don't love you anymore. Did I ever? Just loved my version of me around you. So
we equate our selfish passion, i.e. our feelings, the outcome,
yes.
We equate that with love and emotion for somebody else.
What you can do for me rather than what God teaches and what Jesus came came first to serve and not be served.
Wow.
Well, think about the people that just say, what do you want? What do you expect out of your marriage? I expect to be happy. Well, the Bible doesn't talk about that at all. I mean, it's you don't get married to be happy. You get married to be holy. And it was a tough lesson for me to learn that. I certainly wasn't anything I came into the marriage with.
Well, and that brings me to the second point that I said is the second week pre-marriage at Gateway for people going through a pre-marriage, there's a lesson called A Healthy We Starts with a Healthy Me. And I think your marriage can never be healthier to the degree that you are as a healthy individual. You cannot have a marriage healthier than the 2 individuals. If they're damaged, the marriage can't rise above the level of that. So if we can start by examining ourselves and realizing what are my areas of bondage and issues that we are kind of rubbing up against as we're courting. A lot of couples don't want to go there because it could break them up. We don't want a conflict because it could break us up. We kind of think it's a celebration when a couple goes through pre-marriage and they choose not to get married. We don't want that, but that's the idea of a pre-marriage class, is to bring up those things, because I know I was too insecure to talk about those things during our dating because I had no idea about his past relationships. I was too insecure to hear about it. Well, what was that about for me? Right there is a huge red flag that I'm so insecure that I don't want to hear about.
So that's where Liz was unhealthy, and where I was unhealthy is I probably would have just lied about it, because I would have felt like she would completely reject me if she knew everything about me, because I had no clue whatsoever what that type of intimacy was like. I had never experienced it.
When Karin and I went through our pre-marriage counseling, it was a pastor on staff who had been our youth pastor. Or the college and career pastor, and he had only been in that role for a brief period of time and didn't have a lot of experience. He's a great guy, he's got a great marriage, he and his wife are still married today, but didn't have any experience in the pre-marriage counseling role and was kind of working through the textbooks. And I remember he asked, well, what kind of issues do you have? And I said, well, I have a couple. There are 2 issues that she really needs to stop doing these things. There's an indicator right there. But the 2 things that we worked through were this. Her thing was she had a habit of putting her hands in my face. Like to push me back. She put her hand on my forehead and pushed me back. That was her way of addressing whatever. And I've trained in martial arts. I have really quick reflexes. I'm claustrophobic, and I played football all my life. So when a hand's coming in my face, I'm going to swing, and I'm probably going to do more than that. And I was terrified I would react and reflex and hit her. I'm like, that is the last thing in the world I don't want to do. So we managed to stop that. And I thought, what a great success, what a great win of our pre-marriage counseling was. And what was the other one? Oh, I will ask her a question, and 22 years later, this still happens. And it's because we're different people. then it was a problem for me. And now I realize there's a reason for that, and it's supposed to be that way. But I will say, quick, where's a fire extinguisher? And she'll go, why, is there a fire? No, I like the taste of it. Yes, there's a fire. I've already thought through this. We really need a fire extinguisher, like now. And she's like, but could we put it out another way? I'm like, we don't have time for this thinking and processing. We need to deal with this crisis now. And so that was kind of that was all of our pre-marriage counseling. That was it. And I tell people all the time, we look back 22 years now, and there were moments of tears and laughter and screaming and yelling. And there were moments that I look back and go, if God hadn't done this, there is no way. An experienced veteran pre-marriage counselor would have told us, given your two pasts, run from each other as far and as fast as you can. You got no business being together. But I also remember one of the couples that we worked with, it's been almost 10 years now, they sat across from us and we talked through their vision for their marriage. We talked about what all they wanted to do and who they were and how they'd been. And we got to the last session. And I said, so I just want you to give me a vision. We're going to fast forward 5 years from today. It's Thursday afternoon. It's 6 o'clock. Where are you at? What are you doing? And she said, I'm at home. And I'm cooking dinner. And I got the kids ready for bed already so we can have dinner and put the kids down and enjoy our time together. And I said, and it's what time? She said, probably 5 or 6 o'clock. And I said, okay. And I turned to him and I said, when was the last time you were home at 6 o'clock? And he burst out laughing. And I said, what? He said, I'm a cop. I never get home at 6 o'clock, ever. And I turned to her and I said, what if you didn't get home at 6 o'clock? I mean, you married a cop with a tough job. What if he didn't come up at all? And she just fell apart. She's like, well, I thought he would quit the job. I'm like, wow. So what he's invested his entire life and education and career in, he'll give all that up for you. But this is the first time it's come up. And it's exactly what you said. Are you doing this because you make me feel good? Is my life better because you're in it? Or am I doing this because I love you? It's a whole different question.
Those are the kind of conversations that will make or break a marriage, and it's better to have them prior to the marriage. But even afterwards, I'll see couples in my office all the time that say, we just chose the wrong people. We're not in love anymore. We made a mistake. And my answer to that is, did you make a covenant? Did you put that third person in your marriage? And more times than not, it's yes. And I said, so God knew that we are human and that we were going to get to these places, and that's why we have to understand the covenant, because God knew we would get to these places. And sometimes it is just the covenant that holds us together. It's not intended to be the only thing, but sometimes that is the thing when we don't want to be married, that we realize we made a promise. And it's a journey with 3, not 2.
Right.
And that's what's going to set us up to get through the hard times and know that He's not meeting my needs. And I feel like maybe He's never going to get it. And so I have a third person that I can go to fill those places. That's what the healing teaches you. That God, you can be everything my spouse is not being for me right now. And the best prayer that I think I had when we were working on some difficult times in our marriage, rather than, which I did, there's this and there's this, all these issues I needed Him to work on, Jeff. And when I started switching to saying, God, change me, that was the best way to pray for Him.
Now, we're running out of time for this episode, but I would love to, if you guys would stay on for another session, I'd love to record another episode with you. And I really want to jump into, one of the questions that we hear, and I'm sure you hear it, is, but you don't know how bad we are. You don't know how bad my life has been. You don't know what I've done wrong. Mm-hmm. And while good solutions are good solutions for everybody and good solutions work for everybody, the reality is if people don't know what journey you've walked in, it's hard for them to trust that you understand the journey they're in. Right. So if you guys are game, I'd love to have you for another episode.
Sure.
Thank you for watching Transforming Grace TV. I hope you'll come back for the next episode as we visit with Pastor Liz Jones and her husband Jeff. We really want to dig into some of the realities of marriage and life and be a little bit transparent about the journey that we've walked. We want you to know that you're in capable hands. We have a God who is willing and able, and beyond that, desires to see you live a happy, healthy marriage. And hope was never taken. He died and was resurrected. We just need to reveal him. And we want to do that right here on Transforming Grace TV. I am Loren Norris with my beautiful co-host Karin, and we'll see you next time on Transforming Grace. Have a blessed day.